Hello, I am Dr. Alana McLaughlin. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and today I'm here to share with you about nutrition and movement, which is the topic we discussed yesterday in office for those who are able to join us. And I love these discussions because it really comes down to who is there and different experiences they have, and they always add something in that I'm going to share with you as well. So, the topic of nutrition is where we started. And as we began looking at what that means and how it can impact how we feel, I like to bring that up of sorry, I just got a message coming in. There we go. I like to bring up that impact of how do you feel if you change something? And we talked a little bit about blood type nutrition, if we follow that and what that looks like. And that was really interesting because we had two people in there who were type A, and then there were two of us in there that were type O. So looking at the differences and how they felt over the years, and for example, the two that were in there did a nutrition plan at one point where it was vegetarian, and they said, they felt really good. It was like shedding weight, even though they were both at a healthy weight at the time, very active. And they said they noticed that difference of like shedding that weight really easily just by switching into that nutritional pattern. And they actually went somewhere to do that as like a program. And on the other hand, we talked about, okay, if we did that, how do you make sure you get enough protein? How do you make sure you keep your optimized levels of B12 and things like that? And it is possible. And it also depends on kind of how your body does with those types of foods. So another person may go on to mostly vegetarian, especially if it's like a raw, and they may feel terrible. Like it's really hard to digest. They get a lot of gas and bloating. Their body has a harder time with it. So we look at how do we optimize? Is that going to be ideal for you, or is there a better way, something else that your body needs and does better with compared to somebody else? So, in general, if we're looking at nutrition and we pull out like our plate or our hand again and look at what should we be eating, and ideally, like our protein is about the size of our palm. So, we talked a little bit about the Whole30 nutrition plan, and that's kind of the basis of that too. But if you think about it, that is about the size of the amount of protein a person needs per setting. So somebody asked, like, what about these programs where you like stack in like 40 grams of protein multiple times a day and you need like 200 grams of protein? Some people may be able to do that and they might be able to go through it digestively. Other people might just feel heavy, as somebody had mentioned. They're like, I just feel heavy when I do that and it just doesn't feel good. And so that goes down to, are we in this rest and digest state when we are eating, or are we stressed out and not secreting the acids and enzymes we need to break everything down? So the other aspect is that, and I'll have to look and see if there's any new research on this, but from school, what we learned is 20 grams of protein is about max that your body can absorb. So if we have extra protein going in that moment, then that filters through our kidneys. So that is also why people, if they have any kind of kidney disease, they really look at some different factors, but protein is one of those components of taking the pressure off of the kidneys. So I generally will guide people and say, increase the frequency of meals, especially if you have metabolic imbalances happening. If you have some kind of conditions already happening, we generally need to stabilize that blood sugar, and then that will help bring our baseline of like stress and cortisol and the functioning down to a more healthy baseline that will then oscillate with little stressors and whatnot. So if we have that dialed in, we're getting our protein, maybe on our plate, some have like a plate that'll show you your fruits and vegetables should be like half of your plate. Mostly your non-starchy vegetables, though. Your starchy vegetables should be no more than like a quarter. That would be things like potatoes. And then we have a little circle in the middle of that plate, this one that we were looking at. That is our healthy fats, like oils, nuts, and seeds, and things like that. I gave the comparison of like fitting in the palm of your hand for those types of things, as well as like your grains. And then you're balancing it all out each meal. So figuring out what goes well together. There's actually specific pairings of what foods to put together, what foods not to put together. So that's always interesting if you want to go to that next step. And then yesterday we really dove into kind of the nutritional aspect. If we're already doing a lot of the things that are helpful in stabilizing blood sugar, and one, I will say with that one person that we mentioned, last week in the talk was to help people sleep. Sometimes, if people are going through intermittent fasting or not eating during certain times of day, the the longer the window, sometimes it's harder to control with blood sugar regulation. So you can actually add like a little snack in before going to bed, and that can be like a handful of nuts and seeds, and that will then allow you to sleep through the night easier or more likely to. And that was the case for a couple of the people there. Said yes, they had noticed a difference with that change. So that was really cool to see, putting it into application of something you can do right now that makes such a big difference. The other part of that is the concept of intermittent fasting is almost like this controlling feature, right? Of having to have this little window when I eat. And so it can be almost stressful to try to figure out, okay, what am I going to eat? Am I going to get in my calories? Are you getting enough calories in that window? Or are you getting out of that and then feeling like hungry? And then you're thinking about food until you go to bed and it's disrupting sleep. So it can be this component that can shift and then not be so great for us. And in the real picture, if we are eating during the day, we stop eating around 6 or 7 at night, then we go to bed, 9 or 10 depending, and then you get up in the morning maybe at 5 or 6, you shower, you do your morning routine, you're not eating then until 7 or 8. You're getting a pretty good fasting window, if you want to call it that. That's like our natural cycle. And that is the way I like to look at it. It's not as controlling, it's just what we do, right? And there are cases somebody brought up where there is research on fasting and doing like a 3-day fast where it really has this kickstart, or this reset, I guess would be a better word, for the immune system. So there is good data for that. But if you're coming from a place where your blood sugar is dysregulated and you have a hard time even going through like missing one meal, this can actually be riskier for a person like that and not be able to get the benefits. But as we get everything more regulated, then those are the kinds of things that we can add on as an additional health benefit. Once our body is stable enough to do that, then we can get these additional benefits out of something like that. The other part that I wanted to talk about was um, the like using food as therapy, using herbs, using kind of things that people eat in different areas of the world. Most places I've mentioned before have like adaptogenic herbs and different seasonings and spices that they use. We traditionally use, I would say, probably black pepper and regular iodized salt are kind of the two common. But if we upgrade those and we use more turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, cayenne, like there's all these different herbs that are really good for our circulatory system, for our lipids, for our mental focus and digestion. So a couple of recipes came up this week. One of them, one of the people in office with us during the class yesterday, she does these great mixes, and it's like I think she called it like a fire water. So you take vinegar and then you add in all kinds of stuff to it. So you can slice up onion and garlic, and I did a list. Let's see, turmeric, ginger, some orange or lemon, like slicing those in there, and you put it in there, and then you let it sit for like 4 weeks, and you let it kind of go through this process, and then you strain off all of the everything you put into it, and you have this beautiful liquid that you then put in the refrigerator, and you keep that throughout like winter, or you can redo it every so often, and you just take a spoonful of that every day as you're feeling like you're coming down with something or not feeling well or need some energy. You do that instead of doing something else. It's like working ahead so that you have it when you need it. um, Another one that came up with that too is for like every day the aches and discomforts, and I say kind of this term inflammation. We'll talk about that in a minute. Is a recipe that somebody actually sent to me, and it's taking honey, and then in that honey you add in one. Let's see, it was 7 tablespoons of honey, and then you add in 1 tablespoon of turmeric powder, 1 tablespoon of ginger powder, and then just like a pinch of black pepper as the one that activates the absorption of the turmeric. And you mix it all together, and then same thing, you just take a spoonful of that each day, and you see what the difference makes within your body. So if we break those apart and say, okay, well, turmeric, we see in a lot of different things if people are having like joint discomfort, or even within the system of things feeling out of balance or painful or whatnot. Turmeric is such a good one for that. Ginger, same thing. Like if there's digestive things, if there's areas in the body, especially in our joints or muscles, ginger is a really great one for calming that down. Um, and the thinking about, if we go back to that Whole30 concept, we tied in this little bit of, okay, well, what about like the sweeteners, or what do we do for flavor? And so in this case, they're using the honey as the base, and the other one, it's using vinegar as the base. And if we're replacing out these processed foods and or processed, yeah, foods, sugars and things, instead we use something like pure honey or pure maple syrup, or there's other sweeteners, dates, monk fruit are great natural sweeteners. Fruit by itself, it changes the taste buds, and that will change your energy levels. That will give you more motivation. Your body will feel better, your digestion will feel better. But it's the cycle, and it can be really hard to get out of. You think about when you walk into a store, what is the first thing you walk into? It's like these aisles of the seasonal candy, or like whatever, the donuts and all the things. And so you're like, okay, you have to get through that section to get to where you want to be, to get the healthy foods. Or this time of year, depending when you're watching it, is harvest season. So how much can you package ahead of time through canning or freezing or dehydrating, so that during the winter you still have your fruits and vegetables that are preserved in a way that that exactly what's in it. So that's the next level of getting to, if you can get your own food prep, then you can actually start producing your own food, as even like that next level of dedication. That can be a lot, but it can also make a difference in that satisfaction you get out of it. Um, so if we look at that whole picture, and kind of other areas that we went off of, is like, okay, well, we have to unwind this over time, right? We didn't get to the body we're at right now just overnight. It's something that we've been building in these habits, or we've had these certain things that have been challenges to us. So how do we do one thing that we can add in? And some people, that's nutrition is the easiest thing to change. Some people, it's going to be the movement side is the easiest thing to change. So meet yourself where you're at and figure out, okay, what can I do? Maybe it's the changing over to a different, instead of having soda, maybe instead you do lemon water, or you infuse like berries into water, something like that, to where it's a flavor, but it's not all the processed sugar and whatnot that you're used to. Retraining those taste buds, and you'll start to feel better too with just the water. You're hydrating, you're getting those good healthy electrolytes in there. And that came up too, of, well, what about like the packets now, you can do electrolytes. They usually have a sugar, or the non-sugar ones usually have something else in them that are sweetening it, that is oftentimes artificial, or stevia, I think is the most common one. So I'd say, well, if you unwind that even one step further and use like trace minerals, or these ocean minerals that you then put in your water, you almost immediately get this like energy, or this like clarity in thinking, and your body soaks it up, and you often need less hydration than by doing that. The other component to that is, if we're going into thinking about when we're sick and our nutritional patterns, our bodies go into like a fasting type of period. So that kind of goes back to that 3-day fast and like the immune reset. Our bodies almost naturally do that when we're not feeling well. We don't really feel like eating. And so then I'm like, okay, add in the bone broth soup, or it could be a vegetable soup that you make into a broth, that are very nutrient dense, but very easy for our body to digest. And we do that a little bit too in the winter time when it's colder. We want more warming foods that are easy to digest and absorb, because our bodies are already cold. We need that nourishment. So if we go from there and say, okay, so that's the person where we're going to work a lot on nutrition. And the other side is this movement aspect. And I pair them together because they often are intertwined. If we're eating poorly, we don't have the energy to do the movement that we want. Our bodies are overwhelmed and storing all this extra, and our liver is overwhelmed because it's having to process all these different things. But if we start changing one thing in how we eat, we'll usually have better energy. Our metabolism starts increasing by eating more frequent meals that are protein based to stabilize our blood sugar. And we'll sleep better to give us even more energy. So then we can get to this movement side of things. And the movement side is really important, because we don't want to just go like vigorous exercise, just crazy, and your heart rate is up, and then you feel super tired. That's not what we want. That spikes more cortisol, and most people already have too much cortisol. We need to bring it down into a restorative movement pattern. So that can be walking. It maybe is walking at an incline on a treadmill. It might be gently swimming laps. There's so many ways that we can get that movement. Usually people start with the walking if possible. Um, and what that looks like is I've got a handout that I'm almost done with, and it goes over the guidelines for how to support that that aerobic exercise, but in a way that is going to fit with a person who is trying to either lose weight or maintain weight. And usually it is like if you're trying to lose the weight or increase metabolic health, it's 250 minutes a week. So you break that down, and that's really not that much if you just dedicate a time each day to do it. And if your body allows, that's where we go back to the food. If there's a lot of discomfort in the walking and the inflexibility and whatnot, then we can clean up the nutrition, which will help relieve some of that inflammation. And then it'll be easier to be able to do the movement, to lose some of the water weight, start losing some of the excess that is kind of weighing us down, literally. Um, and then on the other side of that, with the aerobic, the other great way to increase our metabolism is to boost our metabolic tissue, which the main one that we can do that with is our muscles. So as we're gaining lean body mass by body weight exercises, so just doing repetitions, 15 to 20 reps, and it's 3 to 4 sets, and doing that like 2 to 3 times a week will make a huge difference. Maybe choose one area to focus on, and you're doing some things that work on kind of whole body, but maybe there's one area like if I could like see that look different, it would then help propel me into that next phase. So one person I talked to today mentioned it's really in the legs of like I really like upper body I feel pretty good with, but the lower body I really want to focus on that. So perfect. Find a couple of exercises. She mentioned squats and lunges that she really does, and then doing like a lunge where you're doing your toes out. So those are perfect. If you do those 15 to 20 reps, doing 2 to 3 sets, and then do it like every other day, that's going to set you up. Or maybe it's easier to do like 2 days, get a break, a couple days, and have a break. So you can set it up to how it's going to work with your schedule to be successful and to be sustainable. And again, those 15 to 20, it might be modified to begin with. If it's a squat, maybe you're just kind of barely going down and up, but you're contracting those muscles, like making them, clenching them, and then releasing up. And maybe you start there and then you start getting a little bit more range of motion where you're going down a little bit further. And you'll start to see the progression. It'll start becoming easier. You'll notice a difference in your balance as you're doing every day-to-day things. And I think that is key too, is that what you're doing in your body weight exercises, it's functional. It's going to help you with whatever else you're doing in your day-to-day life. So those were the big categories that we talked about with the kind of movement and nutrition and bringing them together. And each week there will be overlap. I know some of this I talked about last week, but maybe those are things that you're really working on and the repetition is going to help you. So I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you again next week, which is our bonus week. So it's going to be on mindset. So I look forward to seeing you there, and let me know if you have any questions.